Au hea o koe na au makua kapona au makua kiao na kia i o kapona kia i o kiao na ula lele o kapona ula lele o kiao. Au hea o koe na kupuna e hono he mo o puna I kia alo he pula pula he mamo e hono mako he kini kamale. He wahi leo ho'onani ho'omai ka ia mililani aku ke ia o ko ia kato hoi. He wahi leo mahalo, he wahi aloha, leo aloha ke ia. He wahi leo mahalo ke ia, ina pōmai ka ia pau e luhelele I mena I luna o kākou. He wahi leo mahalo ke ia, ina haawina a pau e pāholo mena I luna o kākou. E olu e ho'omalu mai a mākou, e alaka ipono mai a mākou e kākou mai e kōtua mai. E kokua mai e ho'oikaika mai a kākou e ho mai a kākou e ka ikea me ka na'auau I luna o ke ala nani pau ole o ka imi ho'a na'auau e ano kākou o Hawaii imi loa. No leila e ka pō hiwa, ka pō pano, ka pō nui ho'o lako, ka pō kini o ka pō lehu, ka pō mano. E kokua mai a mākou e alaka ipono I ke ia halawai. E ho'omalu I ke ia halawai no na mea ko'i o ka mo'olelo Hawaii a me ka mo'olelo kālai aina ma Hawaii nei. E kokua mai a mākou na alaka I ma ke ia lumi nei. No ke alaka ipono ana I ka lāhui a me ke alaka ipono ana ia Hawaii a pau, Hawaii pāma mau Hawaii imi loa. No ko kako noho hou ana I lalo o ko kako ali'i o ia ho'i ka aina. No leila ea mai no kako he mau kawa no ka aina. E olu e kokua kako o mai a mako. E ku hou I luna o ko kako moku o ia ho'i a Hawaii. E mauli o la hou ka lahui Hawaii a mauli o la hou ko kako aina. O ia iho no ko kako leo pule, lele vale ka pule, lele. A mama ua noa. Mahalo.
Mahalo po mai. Aloha mai kako. I'm Brianne Nu'uhiva. I'll be your moderator today. And I'm going to introduce our gracious host, Councilmember Kia Aina, who is a Honolulu City Council member representing the windward side of Oahu, with over 30 years of public service experience in Washington, D.C., Hawaii, and the Pacific Islands region. In addition to serving President Barack Obama as Assistant Secretary for Insular Areas at the U.S. Department of the Interior, Esther had an extensive career on Capitol Hill in senior management positions. Esther worked on many pivotal Native Hawaiian issues at the federal level, including the Apology Resolution, the Hawaiian Homelands Recovery Act, and the inclusion of Native Hawaiians in the U.S. position supporting the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. In Hawaii, she served as First Deputy for Hawaii's Department of Land and Natural Resources, Chief Advocate for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and Land Asset Manager for Kamehameha Schools. So we'll turn it over to Esther to introduce the rest of our panel.
Thank you so much, Brianne. Aloha mai kako. Thank you for all of you for being here in person as well as online, being live streamed by OEV TV. I first wanted to thank the organizers of this panel discussion. Mahalo to Chair Tommy Waters and the Honolulu City Council, as well as the Mayor's Office of Culture and Arts. The Executive Director, Jennifer Santos, has been helping us to organize this panel discussion today. As many of you know, the purpose of this panel discussion is to talk about the political history of Native Hawaiians at the state, federal, and international levels of government. There has been so much chatter going on social media as well as in the press with regard to the cuts in funding and legal threats facing our Native Hawaiian community and pathways forward. So we thought that we'd have a panel discussion of experts in different fields just to share their mano'o of all of the positive things that have been going on in our community for the last 30 to 40 years. Our distinguished panel today includes Dr. Lilikala Kame'ilihiva, who is a senior professor at Kamaku o Kalani. She's trained as a historian. She is also an expert in Hawaiian cultural traditions and the Hawaiian sovereignty movement and has served as executive producer of the 2005 DVD Natives in New York Seeking Justice at the United Nations, and as a scriptwriter of the 1993 award-winning documentary An Act of War, The Overthrow of the Hawaiian Nation. Her books include Na Wahine Kapu, Sacred Hawaiian Women, He Mo'olelo Ka'au o Kamapua'a, a legendary traditional of Kamapua'a, the Hawaiian pig god, and Native Land and Foreign Desires, Pehea La E Pono Ai. Brandon Maka'avaava is the Vice President of the Nation of Hawaii, which is the oldest Hawaiian independence organization. He assists the President, Pu'ohonua Dennis Bumpy Kanahele, in the day-to-day operations of Pu'ohonua o Waimanalo, the nation's sovereign land base. Brandon also leads the Nation of Hawaii's delegation to the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, where he has given interventions on Hawaiian national sovereignty, peaceful coexistence, economic development, innovation, and the power of connectivity. Brandon is also the Minister of Housing for the Nation of Hawaii and is also president of Napo'e Kokua, a nonprofit organization that advocates for the development of more affordable housing options for Hawaiians. Brandon advocates on behalf of the Nation of Hawaii at all levels of government on different issues impacting Hawaiians. Cody Haya, who is with us via Zoom in Washington, D.C., is the Chief of Staff for U.S. Senator Mazie Hirono, the first female Native Hawaiian Chief of Staff to serve in the U.S. Senate. She previously served as a legislative assistant for U.S. Senator Daniel Inouye, D.C. Bureau Chief for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and Deputy Prosecuting Attorney for the City and County of Honolulu. Cody has been critical to advocating for our Native Hawaiian community in Washington, D.C. Cully Watson is the current chairman of the Hawaiian Homes Commission, which oversees the State Department of Hawaiian Homelands. He previously served as the chairman from 1995 to 1998, with his background in the nonprofit and for-profit sectors, legal counsel for OHA, and as a litigator in government and private practice. Cully has extensive experience in housing development and a keen understanding of the complexity of Native Hawaiian issues, including our Hawaiian Homelands program. Lastly, our moderator is Brianne Nu'uhiva, who advises and advocates for Native governments and Native businesses, enterprises in Hawaii and on the continent. She previously served as Deputy Staff Director for the majority on the U.S. Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, where she led the team's self-governance, public lands, labor, energy, water, and gaming portfolios. And she also served as Chief Advocate of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, where she managed federal, state, and local advocacy. She is a frequent speaker and lecturer on topics ranging from federal Indian law to tribal sovereignty development to Native Hawaiian rights.
Mahalo, Council Member. And we know, Dr. Kame'elehiva, that you have a class to teach today, doing the good work on behalf of us all. So we will begin our panel with a question for you. You've been active at the United Nations on behalf of the Native Hawaiian community on the decolonization process for many years. Can you share about the history of advocacy with your students, as well as your efforts at the community level on genealogy and land?
Thank you so much. I would love to do that. I'm watching the time, so I have 10 minutes, and then I'm going to hop off and I'm going to teach class, okay? So if anybody sees me, I'm going to share screen because I want to start off with what we always talk about when we go to the United Nations. And I guess the first time I went was in 1995. I was in Geneva, where there was a working group on indigenous populations, and then it became the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and I moved to New York. So then I started to take students to New York because it's cheaper to get to New York than Geneva. And I thought it was really good for us. If we're going to have our own country, we should have students who have experience working on that UN level and meeting people from all over the world. So we've been doing that. I've been doing that, about 20 years. I missed a few years, 4 or 5 years during COVID. We didn't go. The UN was closed down. When it reopened, we went back again. So we have students who go now, and what our purpose today is to tell other indigenous peoples about how we can check out what our genealogies look like. And the reason we do that is because We didn't just arrive in Hawaii yesterday. We've been here for 100 generations. And people say, oh, she's just making it up. No, I'm going to show you my chart. I'll show you. I got all the footnotes too. You can see where it is. So let's see. Can everybody see this timeline? Is this okay, folks? What do you think, Cody? Is this okay? Can you see it okay?
Yes,
Okay.
mahalo.
All right. So is this big enough? I can make it a little bit bigger. So when I line up these are not all of the Cosmogonic genealogies. I like Paliku because this is my family. This is the Pele people. I like to show Paliku. But we also have Ololo for Wakea. We have the Kumuhonuas for Kane. The Kumuulis are for Wakea, but also for Kanaloa. Won't go into it in detail because I teach a whole semester on this, so you can come and check. I let people in for free. Just let me know you want to come in the class. I'll let you in, okay? But we go back to 500 BC. If we start with Iliuokalani and go back 20 years for every generation, the first generation will be 100 BC, it'll be 500 BC rather, and it starts with this Kumuhonua genealogy that comes from Tahiti. Folks, you may not know, Pele was born in Tahiti. So they're our closest cousins, and we sail back and forth. It only takes 2 weeks to sail from Hawaii to Tahiti or Tahiti to Hawaii, and if it's a good wind, it's only 10 days. We never stopped sailing. We were always sailing. But okay, so here's all the things that are happening. I won't go through every story that there is. We see that the Paliku, this is the Haumea genealogy where women and female Akua become very important. Starts around 380 BC. And then we've got the Kanaloa folks coming in from Raiatea around 320 BC. And then we have Ololo, which is the Wakea genealogy coming in on 180 BC. And then they're doing their things on the different islands. I'm going to move along quickly because we don't have a lot of time. But the story is that religion changes over time everywhere in the world. Kane was more important at one time, and eventually Haumea, Earth Mother, is going to be most important. And she's going to have different Kane she sleeps with Haumea and Kanaloa. They make Hina the moon. And then we're going to see later on that we have Haumea being reborn in all of her female descendants. So ladies, if you're Hawaiian, you are Haumea. She's reborn in us. My kumu, Puakanahele says it's in our DNA. Men, you are Kane. You are Wakea. See how that works? The genealogy, the ancestors come down to guide us. So this story of Earth Mother, Sky Father is about 240 AD. Okay, so we're having all kind of interesting chiefs, and we have all kind of stories about all of these guys, and we have the Maui clan around 700 AD that sail all around the Pacific. And then we get into Puna and Hema. Hema went south to Tahiti, had a whole bunch of children there. And here's Maveke and Mo'ikeha, and La'amai Kahiki, he's sailing back and forth too, and the Hana La'aikis and the Hana La'anuis. Wow, lots of people. I'd like to point out in 1400 AD is Maili Kukahi, who divides the land into Ahupua'a, makes a rule. If you live in the land, you're going to take care of the land because you can only eat from that land. Don't go next door to the next neighbor. Don't go to the next valley. No, stay right there. Okay. And this is something we should be doing today because we need to produce our own food today. So I'm really glad that there's so many folks working on food. Love what Bumpy's doing and my Manalo growing all that food. I love the way that Kali has an idea about how we're going to make more food and more land and Hawaiian homelands as well. Okay, but zipping along, these are all these great chiefs. Oh, look, there's Umi Ali Loa. We know a lot about him. Oh, there's the Pi'ikeas and the Pi'ilanis. Okay, very good. And the Cavellos. Yep, we have a lot of them around today. Okay, so then we're going to get to the time of foreigners. Do you know that when Captain Cook came in 1778, we had 1 million Hawaiians? And he was the first to bring us many, many diseases. So we had all kind of diseases. And by the time, and then we got missionaries. There were about 14 different companies and missionaries that came to Hawaii. I think we need a lot of help. I don't know. But we went down to 300,000 Hawaiians by 1830 census. Then when 1893, when the American military invaded our country, we were 40,000 Hawaiians. And the Queen put a kapu maluhia. I just want to put that out there for just a short bit. Kapu maluhia means, she said, the Queen, Liliuokalani said, that no Hawaiian was allowed to kill any American soldier. That was a kapu. In fact, it's still a kapu. Because she knew, the Pope said under international law, if someone invades your country and you don't kill them, You have a right to your country back forever. Oh, there we are. She set it up. We have a right to our country back forever. So I just want to say, we were 40,000 Hawaiians. We have Kapu Maluhia. They imprison the queen. She translates the Kumulipo. Okay. Then we get to start talking about, and here I am, I'm generation 120. And then we start talking about the rebirth of the Hawaiian nation. We have Hokulea. Are there only 40,000 Hawaiians? No. In the 1980 census, we're up to 220,000. We have our immersion schools, Punanaleo. We have students at the university. This is where we're starting in 1986, Kamakakuokalani. And then today, well, this is 2024, last year, there are 680,000 Hawaiians in the world. And by 2030, according to CNHA, by 2030, we'll be 1 million Hawaiians again. Come to collect the rent. Okay. So I want to say that no matter how bad things are in DC right now, and I don't want to minimize that at all, nothing is as bad as 1893 when our country was taken over. Nothing. And we survived it. And we're thriving. And we're back. And we could hiki ke olelo Hawaii na manawa apau ina vahi apau hiki no. So, and I got to tell you, I'm still teaching at the university, and I have brilliant students every single day that I have class. Okay. So what about the UN then? All right. So I've been taking students to the UN, and now we're talking about our genealogy project. We find 9,000 pages of genealogy at the Hawaii State Archives, handwritten. We're typing them up. We're putting them online. Okay. So you can go to our link is, where is it? I don't have it on this one. Nope. It's on the next one. But here we are at the UN. There's the UN stuff behind us. We're wearing our red kihei. And we go to try to take students there all the time. Okay. So the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues has a lot for us to learn. We learn about what other Indigenous people are doing. We learn about what's happening in the Pacific. We learn about what the UN says we can do. We could decolonize if we were to organize. We could decolonize, as a matter of fact. I have a friend who said to me, who works at Pearl Harbor, I told him, brother, don't forget, we want the country back. He said, Auntie, if it's not the Americans, it's going to be the North Koreans, Chinese, or the Russians. What you like? Okay, what we like is we'd really like to be our own, wouldn't we? And we would like to not have people telling us what to do. We'd like to take care of our own people. So, okay. It's not up to me to decide where we're going to do next. That's up for young people. I'm too old, but I want to show you my wonderful people that I take to the UN, and we have new ones all the time. Now, here we are, moving along, and I only have a little bit more time left, right? So I'm going to tell you about this. What's a bigger issue than decolonization? Climate change. So we're doing a new course in Hawaiian Studies this semester, Hawaiian Studies 301. United Nations on Indigenous Resilience and Climate Change Emergency in the Pacific. That should be in there too. And I'm co-teaching it with this guy, Professor Josh Cooper. Grew up in Waianae, non-Hawaiian. However, he supports the Native people always, and he goes around the world to helping Indigenous peoples understand what their rights are at the United Nations, especially at the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. But you know what we know about climate change? We have one more degree before we hit the tipping point, and we'll have then no rain, and we'll have drought forever. So how do we solve that? How do we take care of that? I'm suggesting to my students that we need to think about these things right now. We have 1,800 ahupua'a in the Hawaiian Islands, and in the 1,800 ahupua'a, almost every single back of the valley is controlled by DLNR. And if we had people like Hawaiians who wanted to maybe make a nonprofit to go into those lands, cut down the albizia trees, build houses with them, Kali can teach us how, and we would plant ohi olehua to make the water come back into the ground, and we would take care of the water and plant food, and everybody who lives in one of those houses maybe pay only $500 a month rent, but they got to work on the land. Now, I'm a tutu. I'm 72 years old. I can still water the plants. Okay? So this is an idea, but I'm too old to make it happen. So all you guys make it happen. I'm just throwing it out there. 1,800 ahupua'a. There's land. for all of the 53% of Hawaiians who live away to move home. And we will make things happen, and we will take care of the water. And we'll stop the military from poisoning our water. So we have a lot of good things to do, and each one of the people on this panel are fabulous people who can do that. So if you'd like to come to any of my classes, I let people in for free because I think the university should be free. You won't get credit from the university for it, but you'll at least learn about the things that we're teaching, okay? And I'm going to stop sharing here. I went 1 minute over time, kalamai. Aloha. I'm going to catch you guys later. I got to go teach. Email me questions. Okay.
Mahalo nui.
Really kala at Hawaii.edu. Aloha.
We'll start at the far end of our table, moving on to Brandon Maka'avaava. Vice President Maka'avaava, you are also active in the international arena, like Dr. Kame'elehiva, through your engagement with indigenous communities and nation-states around the world. Can you share about your experience as well as the history of how the nation of Hawaii came to be and your advocacy for self-sufficiency?
Yeah, thank you, Graham. Yeah, the nation of Hawaii is the oldest sovereignty organization currently. We have a sovereign land base at Pu'uhonua, Waimanalo. That land base was actually acquired through an occupation of Makapu'u Beach back in 1993. Our president, Uncle Bumpy Kanahele, was tired of seeing our people swept off of the beaches. This was in 1993. This was supposed to be the year of the Hawaiian. And every time he would pull out of the homesteads, he'd see all his friends he went to high school with, his neighbors, his cousins, all on the beach because there's no room in the house. So you go to their yard. There's no room in the yard. You end up at the beach. These people are not strangers. They're our ohana. And he wasn't satisfied with what was going on and the kind of support that they were getting. And so he started to organize them. And he called a meeting. And he had them all show up at Kaupo Beach. There was about 40 of them. And my uncle previously had a history of occupying places. He occupied Makapu'u Lighthouse in 1987. That ended after 2 months when the SWAT team came in and viciously arrested everyone, all the way down to one little baby. So he knows about occupations and he knows what can happen when there's no support there. And so he said, you know what, let's all gather here. You know, I'm not sure what the plans is, but I have tents. You guys have tents. Let's stay here for a little while. So that started the occupation in March 1993. Well, with those 40 people, as they stayed there, and he kind of helped protect them and organize them, they kept hearing about this law that was going to Congress. And this attorney, Francis Boyle from the University of Illinois, reached out to them and told them, you need to pay attention to this law. Because this law that is coming through is unprecedented, because at that time America had only apologized 3 times for what they did to people all over the world. And this law was attempting to be a formal apology. And he said, if this law, as is signed into law, it's going to change the landscape of Hawaiian sovereignty, Hawaiian lands, and all of that. So you need to pay attention. So fast forward. This is all within 1993. November 23rd, 1993, U.S. Public Law 103-150 is signed. This is the first time America has ever admitted to overthrowing a country. They admit that the Hawaiian people have never relinquished their sovereignty over their lands or themselves. They also admit that they stole 1.8 million acres from our people without compensation to us. So armed with this law now, my Uncle Bumpy begins educating the Hawaiians that are at the occupation, because constantly, between March and November, the cops are showing up, public officials are showing up. And usually how occupations end most times in the state is you're given an ultimatum. You have until October 1st to leave or else we're coming in, and everybody's getting arrested. Well, now things have changed because there's this U.S. federal law that says that the state of Hawaii is holding these lands that our people have never relinquished sovereignty over. And so now when the cops would show up, the people down there were educated on this law, and they would, we printed out thousands of copies of the apology law. We would give the cops the law. And so when they would show up with their ticket, we'd give them the law, and we'd tell them, have you read this law before? And they go like, oh, no, we don't know what that is. We're just doing our job. Well, you should read it. This is a federal law. And so they look at the law, and, they don't know what to do. They're not lawyers. They go back to the car. They sit down, talk to the sergeant. About 15 minutes go by, they leave. That happened over and over and over again for 15 months. We had leverage, we realized, over the state. Occupations, especially on Oahu, do not last for 15 months, especially when you take over an entire beach park. Finally, at the end of 15 months, Uncle Bumpy and the state come to an agreement to end the occupation in exchange for more stolen lands up at the back roads of Waimanalo. These 45 acres that we call today Pu'uhonua Waimanalo. I'd like to remind everybody, this occupation was the first and only time an occupation protest ended with the exchanging of lands back to its people. This is a precedence that not a lot of people have utilized yet, but it should be utilized and studied so that we can duplicate these actions, because we're getting to a point in time where we have nowhere else to go. The three things that helped us get to that place is, one, we were across a big tourist attraction, Sea Life Park at the time. Hundreds of thousands of people would be coming to Sea Life Park at that time. So we was protesting every day, telling tourists, this is stolen Hawaiian lands, making the state shame. Two, we utilized the apology law for our protection. The apology law is not something you take into a court and argue your case. The apology law is used on the Aina because sovereignty is an assertion. It's not an argument. We have to exercise sovereignty. The third, we had a critical mass of people. At the height of our occupation, we had 300 educated Kanaka willing to occupy a beach. Not for the weekend and then go back and then, do what our normal life and then come back the next weekend. Every single day for 15 months. The state had no other choice but to offer us lands. That is how we got to where we are today. On this land base now, we have built a village. In spite of all of our challenges, we have gotten no help from the state, no help from any of our trusts. But in spite of those challenges, we have still built a village that operates under its own jurisdiction. We have no permits for any of the things we built. We built our houses, our roads, everything in there on our own. And independence is not something that is given to us. And I'd like to remind Hawaiians that it's not going to be an easy road ahead, but it is possible. There is precedence today. And if anybody would like to learn any more about how we've done it, you guys are welcome to come visit us on our Aina days, where now we're restoring ancient lo'i terraces at the back of our village, along with a lot of our community members, some of them here with us today, just asserting our sovereignty, living. Going into the international arena, like what Auntie Lily Kaladem have done for the last 20 years. We've been to the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and first time I went there was in 2017, and I gave a speech. And and I told them all about this. And then I sat and I heard all the speeches that the other Native peoples gave, and it was heartbreaking. And we felt like, if we're gonna come back next year, we're not just gonna bring our stories of the hardships. We want to bring our successes. And so every year after that, we've come back to the Permanent Forum and shared with them all of the things we're doing in spite of the challenges, what we're achieving, how we're building up our families, how they're succeeding, all of the work we're doing. And that has been a huge impact. We've made a lot of connections to other Indian tribes. In 2023, in fact, we signed 3 treaties with 3 native tribes. The Yurok of California, which is California's largest tribe, the Timbashaw Shoshone, and the Bear River. We entered into an agreement with them, government to government. This is outside of U.S. jurisdiction. The U.S. wasn't a party to these treaties. These are the first treaties that our nation and their nation have ever signed with anybody. The California tribes have never signed a treaty with the United States. But we signed a treaty with them of peace and friendship, where we recognize their sovereignty, we recognize their existence, and when we come to their lands, they're the authority there that we recognize. This can be done today, gang. In spite of all of our problems that we have, there are examples in our community, and what we need to do is begin coming together, finding common values and common cause. You know, we might not agree politically on the direction that we go in the future, or our economics and all of that, but we can agree that Hawaiians have a right to self-determination. We have a right to protect our aina, to protect our families, and this is why I'm here today, to continue building that pilina with these people here in our community as well. But we have a lot of good things ahead, gang, so stick to it. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Councilmember Kia'aina, Vice President Maka'avaava shared about the critical importance of the apology resolution to their work at the international, federal, and state levels. What should people know about the apology resolution and the events in the years leading up to its passage in 1993? And how do you compare the challenges of that time with what Native Hawaiians are facing today?
Thank you so much for that question, Brianne. You know, I think it's so important to contextualize the environment Native Hawaiians faced at the federal level in the 1980s leading up to the apology resolution's passage in 1993. It was an environment that was very hostile. We faced 2 significant challenges. First, whether the United States was liable to Native Hawaiians for the loss of sovereignty and lands arising out of the 1893 overthrow. And second, whether the United States held a trust relationship with Native Hawaiians either under the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act or in general. The answer by the federal government to both questions was a resounding no. We had the majority report findings of the federal 1983 Native Hawaiian Study Commission that concluded that the United States was not liable to Native Hawaiians for the loss of sovereignty and lands arising out of the 1893 overthrow, are not entitled to compensation for such a loss, and denied a trust relationship existed with Native Hawaiians. Then, in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the U.S. Department of Interior Solicitor also issued legal opinions that denied a trust relationship existed between the United States and Native Hawaiians under the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, including up to January 19, 1993, before President Clinton took office. And that solicitor was Thomas Sansonetti. The passage of the 1993 apology resolution was important, therefore, for a number of reasons. It offered a U.S. apology to Native Hawaiians for its complicity in the 1893 overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii and the deprivation of Native Hawaiians to self-determination. It also committed the United States to acknowledge the ramifications of the overthrow, which was the loss of sovereignty and lands, in order to provide a proper foundation for reconciliation between the United States and the Native Hawaiian people. A week prior to President Bill Clinton signing the apology resolution into law on November 23, 1993, the then Solicitor of the U.S. Department of the Interior, who is John Leshy, rescinded the adverse legal opinion on the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. So we have had a politically level playing field since then. Needless to say, post-1993, there has been so many significant strides that have been made on Native Hawaiian issues at the federal level, including the Hawaiian Homelands Recovery Act of 1995 and the 2016 self-governance process established by the U.S. Department of the Interior for Native Hawaiians. And if you don't mind, I'd like to explain both because it's critically important. First, the Hawaiian Homelands Recovery Act was in response to recommendations in 1983 by the Federal State Task Force on the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. And many of you know Melanie Trask. Trask has been very active at the international level, but she was a member of that task force. And they had 134 recommendations. Most of them were for the state of Hawaii. And 2 of those recommendations we remedied under this law. First, it acknowledged that the U.S. Navy took lands out of the Hawaiian Homelands Trust illegally during Hawaii's territorial period. But because the state of Hawaii, by the time they determined to file a lawsuit, the statute of limitations had run out. Second, it called for a designee at the U.S. Department of Interior at a high level to deal with the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. So what we did under the Hawaiian Homelands Recovery Act is we codified a federal process for the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. We designated an assistant secretary to be the official person for the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. And we provided a unique mechanism. When you're dealing with compensation, very often it's easy for people to say we don't have money. So what we did was we said that the Department of Hawaiian Homelands would have the first right of refusal for all federal excess lands in the state of Hawaii ahead of the state of Hawaii and all federal agencies. And that is how they came to have lands by the federal government. And what we did was we had the U.S. General Accounting Office come and do evaluation to determine the compensation for those lands. The 2016 self-governance process, of course, was promulgated by the Obama administration. And if you are not aware, for those of you who have studied federal Indian law or understand the government-to-government relationship with federally recognized Indian tribes, they have either had their government-to-government relationship affirmed through the U.S. Congress, through treaties, or an administrative process at the U.S. Department of Interior called the Bureau of Indian Affairs Federal Recognition Process. No such avenue at the Department of Interior existed for Native Hawaiians because in the rule for American Indians, they geographically left out the state of Hawaii. And as a result, President Obama, just based on a lot of the progress that had been making at the federal level, helped to promulgate a rule that for the first time established an administrative process for federal recognition should a Hawaiian governing entity determine to walk through that portal. I can say cumulatively that for over a century, the U.S. Congress has enacted laws for the benefit of Native Hawaiians in over 250 instances. Beyond the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, there are laws specifically tailored for Native Hawaiians, such as the Native Hawaiian Education Act or the Native Hawaiian Health Care Act, or includes us, such as the Native American Programs Act, the Native American Languages Act, the National Historic Preservation Act, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, and the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act, to just name a few. And while there will always continue to be attempts to zero out or decrease funding for Native Hawaiian programs, it is a battle that we have always faced during the annual congressional appropriations process, regardless of who is in the White House or who controlled Congress. My primary concern in today's time will be any attempt to divert funds for the bigger programs for Native Hawaiians for other purposes after funds were appropriated by Congress. And I will leave that kuleana to Kori Haya, who could talk a little bit more about the challenge that we're facing. What is not happening since 1993 is that we have not seen an attack on the underlying trust relationship between Native Hawaiians and the federal government under the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act or in general. nor has anyone questioned U.S. complicity in the 1893 overthrow or challenged the reconciliation process, which is ever evolving. Having been able to address both these issues in 1993 and 1995, respectively, to me, has solidified and strengthened the federal Native Hawaiian relationship. So to me, without a doubt, I would say that we were worse off during the 1980s and early 1990s than we are now, even with the federal threats and cuts coming down from Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Mahalo, and we already got the pass over to Cody, so she is ready. Chief of Staff Haya, there's a long history of bipartisan support for Native Hawaiian issues in the United States Congress, particularly when the Native Hawaiian community works in concert with American Indian and Alaska Native communities. How can the community best engage in Washington to maintain that broad support for Native Hawaiian issues?
Thank you, Brianne, and thank you again. Thank you for the opportunity to serve on this, to sit on this panel, and for allowing me to. I'm in DC, being like 100 feet tall on that screen. So I think the matter of how to work with the Senate kind of revolves around how many members you can get to support an item, a policy, a program, etc. And when we think of Native Hawaiian programs, each state has 2 senators, and Hawaii has 2 senators, and often Native Hawaiian programs are, with 1 or 2 exceptions, focused on benefiting Native Hawaiians who reside in Hawaii, which tends to really get the attention, or the support rather, of the 2 senators from Hawaii. That's 2 out of 100. So how do you get another 98 senators to support your programs or the activities that you want to do? So you kind of already answered the question, Brianna. I think focusing on coalition building is kind of something along the lines of what Brandon was mentioning earlier. And at the international level, I think what Professor Kume'elehiva was talking about as well. The Native Hawaiian community has already been very adept at finding and building relationships with Alaska Native communities and other American Indian communities across the United States. I think by last count, there are 37 states with federally recognized tribes. So the math there is that's 74 senators who might be interested in supporting an issue if you can share with them why or how it impacts the people that reside in their state. So there are large organizations like the National Indian Education Association that has representation for the Native Hawaiian community regarding education. The National American Indian Housing Coalition, which DHHL participates in fairly regularly, again represents a broad coalition of tribal, Alaska Native, and through DHHL, Native Hawaiian interests regarding housing. And these things don't just happen. This is via both, I think, working with the delegation, being introduced to people you might not have had a chance to work with previously, but just the community doing it on its own. Our ability to provide a system to revitalize a language through our immersion schools, that's been used across the country and across the world to help various indigenous communities revitalize their languages, and that has built in return lasting relationships between the Native Hawaiian community and various indigenous communities across the United States and across the world. So to continue, I think, working on a bipartisan manner or with a bipartisan vantage point really focuses on that coalition building and making those relationships and bridging those connections. I think we'll have an opportunity to talk about this a little bit further, and I think Esther kind of touched on it as well. And I would argue that although there is bipartisan support for broader Native programs, American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian programs, we do see some challenges kind of based on party lines on the questions of Native Hawaiian programs. And that's a conversation that the delegation regularly has with our colleagues across the aisle, helping to educate our colleagues who aren't familiar with the Native Hawaiian community about who we are, about the federal government's trust relationship with us and responsibility owed to us, and why and how that fits into that meets constitutional muster. This is a question we get fairly regularly, and it is a conversation we have pretty regularly with people who just don't know or haven't had the opportunity to take some time to think or learn about the Native Hawaiian community. I apologize because I had a timer set for 10 minutes and I forgot to hit it to get started. So if I'm going over.
You have 6 minutes left if you.
6 minutes. Oh, my sweet heavens. Okay. Well, then I think it's also worth noting then one of the other things that has sort of been talked about or danced about, and I think we're going to talk about it again later, is this question of challenges facing the Native Hawaiian community. So as I said, I think this really kind of demonstrated itself as a partisan matter. And I would argue that post-2001, the support for Native Hawaiian programs has waxed and waned depending on who's controlling the House and Senate and who's in control of the White House. And again, I think that lends itself back to this question of what do people know about Native Hawaiians? How do they support Native Hawaiians? And what we're seeing now, I think, from the administration on down is a attempt to realign the country in such a way that these relationships between the federal government and minority communities, to a certain degree, a minority community like ours, which is also an indigenous community, we have the Venn diagram overlaps there. And that realignment, I think, poses a different type of question for us and challenge for us as we contemplate how to continue the support for these large federal programs. And I think people may not recognize or see the benefit of these programs to them in their day-to-day lives. It's not as if I think a lot of people say, you know, this Native Hawaiian education program was brought to you by federal funding through the Department of Education. But that's one of our longest standing programs outside of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, of course, which was passed in 1921. The Native Hawaiian Education Act was passed in 1986. So for almost 40 years, Native Hawaiian organizations have been relying on that funding to provide supplemental education services for Native Hawaiian students in all sorts of different neighborhoods in Hawaii. And I don't know that people recognize that that's funded by the federal government. And so we do face this challenge and this question of how best to ensure the continuity of these programs so that they can continue helping people in this way. And that's a large part of it, I think, is again recognizing this base between of the trust relationship between the federal government and the Native Hawaiian community, which takes a little bit longer than just dropping by Hawaii, saying, hey, it was great to be here, and then heading back to your state. So we are trying to work to do that education day in and day out. We are constantly fighting those battles. We are constantly seeing those amendments to strip funding. But we've so far been successful, and I think you can count on us to continue ensuring those programs exist. Sorry, that got really deep and dark, and I apologize for that. I feel like it's pretty cloudy here. So, but I think these programs have been here for 40 years because the federal government, it's an acknowledgement that the federal government has this trust responsibility to the Native Hawaiian community, and that fact remains.
All right, and since you have 2 minutes left, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question.
I love it.
Just for folks in the room who may not be familiar with how that budgeting process works, because you'll see something in the media that says President removes all funding for fill-in-the-blank program. What's Congress's role? What can our delegation do? we know you're fighting the good fight on behalf of Native Hawaiian programs to protect that money, but how does that process work?
That's such a good question. And what a time nearing the end of the federal fiscal year, contemplating the question of how to keep the broader federal government funded. But as a general matter, right, Congress controls the purse, so it's Congress's job to appropriate money to keep the federal government running, and to fund various programs that the agencies then carry out. Native Hawaiian Education Program, as an example, carried out by the Department of Education. And so we're in this fight right now, I think, with the administration. Their interest in redirecting funding, for example, at the minority serving institutions, is directly sort of contravenes Congress's authority to determine where money is spent. So this is an ongoing challenge, and one of the reasons why we are faced with this question of how to continue funding the federal government by midnight tonight DC time, so 6 p.m. your guys' time. But the delegation plays a significant role in that because we work to vote on these appropriations bills, and appropriations, even though it seems like a partisan fight, is often bipartisan because they're working to get member interest and support for each bill. So the delegation is certainly working with the broader Congress to continue protecting these programs. But this is a bigger question of presidential authority or lack thereof versus congressional authority, and certainly bigger than my paycheck. But it will be an ongoing one, I think, at some point decided kind of via political will. So does that answer your question? Thank you.
Yes, and we hope you have lots of coffee ready for this evening. I'm going to move along to Chairman Watson now. Thank you, Kelly. Moving to Chairman Watson, the Department of Hawaiian Homeland sits in a very interesting position with the unprecedented level of funding it's received in recent years and the innovative land opportunities that you're pursuing. Can you talk about your advocacy and how you're ensuring the state's role in its administration of the Hawaiian Homeland Trust under the State Admissions Act?
Sure, thank you. First of all, I'd like to mahalo Esther as well as Mayor Blangiardi for putting this event on. Yeah, I think maybe starting with a little bit of the history of the program. You know, this particular Hawaiian Homes Commission Act was the result of the very unfortunate situation regarding the Native Hawaiian people. At the time of contact in 1778, there was about 680,000 Native Hawaiians. At the time of the passage of this act in 1921, there was less than 24,000. And for various reasons, mostly, disease and displacement and various other things, it was very clear that the Hawaiian race was disappearing. Unfortunately, Prince Kuhio was a strong and effective advocate in a lot of ways, and more importantly, with the passage of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. But the reality is, it was kind of a compromise where the Hawaiians kind of lost out in a major way, in that all the sugarcane cultivated lands were excluded, quite a few of the ranch lands were excluded, and that was a result of the imposition of the Organic Act, which opened up homesteading. And so in order to prevent it, these large landowners that were, but renters of government and crown lands from losing the land, they assisted in gutting basically the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act rather than allowing the 132nd, as Prince Kuhio Laduquanum wanted, made it 50%. In any event, the department also, under the act, about 200,000 acres were transferred into the inventory, but very poor lands, very isolated, very difficult to get to, as well as no utilities in most cases, very expensive to develop. So over the last 100 years, we've averaged maybe about 100 units or homesteads a year, for a total of a little over 10,000 in the 100 years that the program has been in existence. Fortunately, in 2022, the legislature decided to change that. And they passed Act 279, which became law, setting aside $600 million for the program. The governor approached me, asked me to join his cabinet, and because of my background as a developer, he knew that I would know how to do this kind of development, especially since I specialize in affordable housing development and the financing approach that was needed. So since that time that I came on about a year and a half ago, under Act 279, we developed a strategic plan. And we kind of modified it depending on, assessments as well as acquisition of new lands, which were allowed under the Act. And so we came up with basically 28 projects that throughout the state, from a major project in Kapolei, Ka'ulu-Kahai, all the way to Hanapepe on Kauai. And so presently we have an anticipated, objective is to develop and as well as award 7,000 new project leases. We'll develop probably half of those with the money we have. But we need additional money. We have 29,000 people on our wait list. In order to eliminate that wait list, it's going to take us about $6 billion. That's not happening. So it's going to be an ongoing process. In the Admissions Act, the federal government basically punted on this program. Besides providing poor lands and no money, they said, well, you the state, if you want to, you the territory, if you want to become a state, you have to not only adopt, but take on the responsibility of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. So if you look at our state constitution today, the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act that was passed in 1921 is now part of our state constitution. And that's where the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, one of the departments, was created in order to manage and administer this particular Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. So how do we accomplish the idea of getting people off the wait list? So one of the things that we've done, recognizing that the people on the wait list, about more than half of them are over 65 and are not necessarily income driven and the wealthier people in our community. So in order to be a little bit more innovative, we've done a whole bunch of different things, primarily in the approach that we use to finance these developments. Most of the money has gone to primarily the infrastructure, which is key. Before you can put a house up, obviously you have to have roads, you have to have utilities and electricity and all that in place. So that's where most of the $600 million has gone. But we've also decided, we got to develop at a scale that's more reflective of the need. So instead of doing small projects, instead of doing the infrastructure first and then doing the vertical construction of the home building, we combine it all. We take large pieces of property. As an example, in Kapolei, our Ka'ulu-Kahai project, we are combining 4 different parcels, and we're doing 700 leases. With the $600 million, we've set aside about $140 million for the infrastructure. So we're going to need another $60 million to complete the infrastructure. But with respect to the vertical construction, that's where we've also become innovative in not only making the awards initially, where we don't even ask the person off the wait list, what is your income, what do you want, whatever. You want to be a homesteader in this particular project? Just say yes. And so when with that yes, we also go through a process. We provide orientation as to what's being developed, the different choices. Now the choices are such that if they are lower income, they can take the option of what we call a low-income housing tax credit with option to purchase, whereby you're income-driven. It's a lower income. You go through a 15-year period of compliance, and then at the end of that, you convert whatever the net debt is. You become the landowner, the homestead owner of the vertical construction. But up front, we changed the law where we also issue a lease up front for the land, which is separated from the vertical construction financing approach. And so you get a pathway to home ownership that typically you were bypassed under the old program. So we've changed that. We've also increased the numbers, so the costs based on economy of scales is a lot less. And then besides the turnkey projects or units that are sold based on your income, you got to pre-qualify for a loan. We also have and have been working with Habitat for Humanity. So if you want to put in sweat equity, you can go that route. Or if you want to build your own house, we'll give you a finished lot, and you build your own house using your own expertise and friends. And so we also are doing high-rises. The Bolodrome is a 23-story high-rise overlooking Diamond Head in Mo'iliili. And so we were able to obtain finance, $155 million to build that project. And so it's all about trying to finance projects that are geared towards our beneficiaries. On Kauai, we acquired a 82-unit townhouse called Waipoli in Kapa'a. And that's another one where we leverage our Nahasa funds with the Rental Housing Revolving Fund in order to finance that. So we're also doing the subsistence ag lots from a quarter acre to 3 acres. If you want a lot and you're going to grow food on it, not necessarily put a house, you got it. You just have to make sure you use it and are active in the use of that particular property. We're also doing lineal descendants, so areas that, like Keanai, Hana, King's Landing, Lanai, in which, based on your connection to that particular area, you are given preference in the award of leases. So we're looking at other areas throughout the state that aren't necessarily a part of the department, but if we can work with DLNR, transfer these lands, and then start to issue leases to the people that live there, especially the Native Hawaiians, then they, instead of having a 65-year lease, they now have a lease that they pay for $1 a year, which has the ability for 99 years with an extension of another 100 years. And we also provide loans for them to either build houses or fix their existing ones. So we're doing a lot of different things, land acquisitions. We also, Act 14, we have a bunch of lands that are owed to us, about 552 acres. We've identified a whole bunch of areas, and so we're getting new lands. We also have, because of our ability to avoid the rezoning requirements that are placed on other private lands, we have developers that are starting to partner with us. And we're also working with a bunch of the different elite trusts, including OHA, to look at how we can develop together. So it's an exciting time for the department. We've got a lot of things going, and we're excited about them. Thank you.
Mahalo. We've heard so many exciting things going on in the various spheres here in the international sphere, federally, at the state level. We're going to turn our panel now to some of the challenges that we're seeing in those different areas and hear from our panelists just briefly about pathways forward there. So we'll start with you, Vice President Maka'avaava. What do you believe is one of the biggest challenges facing our Hawaiian community today, and how we can overcome that challenge?
One of the big ones, I think, is we keep waiting for the government to give us permission or funding. And I think that we've seen when we wait, we just keep waiting. You know, if our kupuna didn't go and occupy Makapu'u Beach, we'd probably still be on the beach. We cannot wait for reconciliation to happen for us. We have to push it. We have to leverage it. We have to, do the work that comes with these things that we ask for. If we asking for independence, then we have to begin to build that. And I think we cannot forget that. Of course, it would help if we got some funds and we got some help. And so this is why, the nation has partnered and worked with a lot of different organizations that maybe normally, you wouldn't see sovereignty people work with. Because for us, sovereignty is not some theory and some self-righteous claim. It's a real thing. And in order for us to have sovereignty, we have to do it by any means necessary. And that means we also have to work with people that have different ideas and different ways of doing things. Because we have to understand all of our people's problems, not just the people that think like us. And so I think waiting for permission is going to get us in trouble, so we got to go. I think also staying in our silos is what is a big problem. And so I invite, a lot of people to, come out and meet with us on the Aina sometimes, like coming to Aina Days, the ones that we host up there at our Pu'uhonua has really opened my eyes to see that there are a lot of people and a lot of supporters of the things we do. And, when you work in unison together with others and you share a vision, you can go so much more farther than you thought, We constantly working with people we've never worked with before. One of the relationships we've built over the years is a relationship with Bellows. Bellows Air Force Station is sitting on, a lot of our lands in Waimanalo. And a lot of things we don't agree on with them, but we do agree on a few things, and one of them is to clean Puha Stream. And so we've put our differences aside to come together to work on cleaning Puha Stream. And I think if we take this approach of finding the things that we agree on to work together on, it'll help to bridge the things that we don't agree on. So, when I look at these cuts that is happening to our programs and what's happening right now and the fear that is being created, it's real and it's palpable and it's sudden. And so we're becoming very reactionary. But I think if we kind of think inwards and think and take an assessment of what we have in our community, not just what we don't have and what we're losing, but look at what we have in our community and start reaching out to these people that we normally never used to reach out to because we had all the funding we needed. And so we just carried on with our own programs. Look at the community, folks, because I think there's a big disconnect right now to our big nonprofits, our big organizations, and the actual community that is going on. When we do things, we think about the ahupua'a. And the ahupua'a is not just a geographical division of land. It's a mindset. And in order for us to have this ahupua'a that is thriving, we cannot just feed the people around us. We have to make sure that we feed the people that we don't even see, all the way down at the beach, all the way at the mouth of our streams. And we got to take this concept and think about it in the work that we do. We cannot just help the people around us or the people that feed into and believe in the same things we believe in. We got to be able to reach the people that we don't even see. And I think if we take in and assess that, we'd see that we have a lot of value here. We get big trust that is under, this pressure and challenges and all that. That's a $13 billion trust. They should be helping us, too. And we help together. It's a reciprocal relationship. That's how the ahupua'a works, so. That is my thoughts on that.
Mahalo. Councilmember Kia Aina. Would you like to respond? And I know I saw you nodding during Brandon's presentation there.
Sure. Well, first, I wanted to add on to the need for a collaboration with various stakeholders, not just at all levels of government, but within our community and across the private sector, with community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, and educational institutions at all levels, right? Elementary, middle school, intermediate, high school, as well as higher education. With regard to DoD, I did want to make a comment because they play such a significant role in Hawaii. And while I also have concerns with some of their activities, I do know that there are areas where we can work on. With regard to Bellows Air Force Station, I know that the community has long been seeking a return of some of those lands, which I support. But I do know that we are also dealing with very serious invasive species management problem across the state, and in particular in Waimanalo, because, we can go on and list a lot of the invasive species, but with regard to the little fire ant and coconut rhinoceros beetle, we also have the coqui frog, which is one of the more significant populations on the islands, and everybody knows about it. They know that it's jumping over the ko'olaus, right? And what are they doing about it? I mean, I see our chair for the Waimanalo Neighborhood Board in the audience. He and a lot of volunteers are actually going to supplement the efforts, the failed efforts of many of our governmental advocates, and going to hand catch them. It's just a matter of time that the population is going to explode across the windward side. Now, why am I mentioning this? So, in this gloom, I'm always one to look for innovative opportunities to collaborate. And so I did want to say something about the Department of Defense Readiness and Environmental Protection and Integration Program. I do know that they are already working with a lot of stakeholders, but we are also at the city and city level hoping to have a cooperative agreement with them to leverage our dollars to address that. So I just wanted to follow up on that. But what I wanted to talk about is we often think about, well, who are making these decisions for Native Hawaiians in all spheres? And the lack of knowledge that a lot of officials at all levels of government seem to have on Native Hawaiian issues. And I think the question for me is, so what are we going to do about it? Right? These are officials, whether they be elected or career civil servants, again, at all levels, city, state, and federal levels. And they are making big decisions for us, including grant making or congressional appropriations. And I feel that we need to stop talking about it and do something about it. Okay, and so you don't have to be an elected leader. For most of my life, prior to being at the city council, I've been told the way as a grunt staffer behind the scenes for many years in Washington, D.C. So whether it be an elected leader, a staff member for an elected leader, or a civil servant, it's so important that we be present. And I think that we need to alter the landscape so that we are in the positions of authority to be making these decisions. Now, I would like to, I know that they're active, but I think they need to be a little more active. So I'm going to be calling out a couple of our Hawaiian institutions, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, the Kamehameha Schools, and other Native Hawaiian organizations who benefit from a lot of the programs that we have, including our Native Hawaiian organizations under the SBA program. Please kokua, not just what is important to you, but what is important for our collective Hawaiian community. I believe they could strategically target higher education scholarships, internships for college students, or fellowship opportunities for mid-level career jobs for our Hawaiian community who are trying to pivot, who are trying to increase their livelihood so that they could advance and increase their wages. And there's, I know, a multitude of fields, but for me, if you're trying to get involved, it should be in policy. It would be public administration, policy advocacy, and two key jobs. And I don't need to be telling you this, but the reason I'm telling you this is because we have a lack of positions. And that would be our Hawaiian community who have knowledge and educational background in land and natural resources management. When I was at the Department of Land and Natural Resources as the first deputy and I walked into the land division, I don't even remember seeing a Hawaiian in a position of authority. Yet, I remember we had the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and many of us calling on them to do a better job with regard to our land inventory. So we need to change the script. That's all I'm trying to say. I also believe that the sharing of information or stories, our culture, and our political history is so important, not just here in Hawaii, but the nation and the rest of the world. We saw that recently with the broadcast of Chief of War, as well as this display of cultural pride with the Kumulipo being recited at Iolani Palace. So at the end of the day, I believe that each and every one of us in this room and are viewing us online has something to contribute in the advancement of our Hawaiian community and our lahui. And we just need to represent. At the City Council, I wasn't expecting to be a Honolulu City Council member. I was pleased to work on 2 issues that are important to our community. First, I helped to establish the first ever Oahu Historic Preservation Commission, and I see a couple of commission members in the audience. And it was because of advocacy from our community that it was even brought to my attention. And I see Mahealani Cipher, who is in this room, who was there at the zoning committee, my first zoning committee, when the Department of Planning and Permitting was recommending a repeal of a law that had been on the books for 30 years but was never utilized by a single mayor. And Mahealani and others, I know Kehau Abad and others from the Hawaii Historic Foundation worked with us to amend the law and work with the administration to get it through. And for those of you, I don't know if I see anybody in Kailua, but as a Hawaiian homeland beneficiary, almost all of my ohana live on Hawaiian homelands. In fact, I'm one of my siblings not. And so when I found out about 10 acres of land in Kailua that were city lands, I helped to shepherd through legislation to authorize the first Hawaiian homelands development in Kailua. And the reason I'm sharing this is because these things don't drop from the sky. It is because of the activism of advocates within our community, as well as positions like myself who are able to kokua. And I'm not saying that we can't teach others to learn. I know that OHA and the Native Hawaiian Law Center at the University of Hawaii, for example, they offer workshops on traditional and customary rights to various levels of official, and bravo for that. But we need to full throttle on all fronts. And so that's all. I just want to say that we need to be present. And we need to be present even if I kind of like painted a picture that we are better off than we were historically. We still need to be able to fight. And the only way we can fight for our community is to be able to have the tools necessary to be able to succeed in that fight. Thank you.
Cody, we're going to move back over to you. As the lone member of our panel currently sitting in Washington, D.C., can you give us a first-hand read on the political and legal climate for Native Hawaiians and what community members can do to support positive Native Hawaiian policymaking in Washington, in addition to moving to Washington and doing those jobs like Councilmember Kia'aina just mentioned?
Wait, I actually put a timer. Hold on. Wait, okay. Thank you. So I think it's really important to have our eyes wide open, sort of dovetailing from what Esther was saying prior. And as I mentioned before, issues impacting the Native Hawaiian community, they wax and wane, and they tend to be really structured in a partisan way, in a partisan manner. But I want to also walk the fine line of saying that although there are challenges and hurdles to overcome, we don't have to be afraid of that either. So I think it may be helpful as an illustration. When President Trump first came into office in 2017, one of his first acts was signing an appropriations bill for full year funding. Appropriations are really on the top of my mind here today. But as part of that, he included what they call a signing statement, and that kind of explains how the president is feeling about the bill he's signing. And he talked there about, or he questioned the legality of the Native Hawaiian education program and programs funded through NAHASDA in that signing statement. So sort of the question of where President Trump is oriented in the case of what does it mean, what does the federal government's relationship with indigenous communities mean, this is sort of a through line from that first year of his presidency to now. It's a challenge, it's a question, and that's not going away. But I don't want anyone to sort of say, now what, in hair on fire situation. We have had some concerns about reprogramming funding, as we talked about previously, the minority serving institution money. That's really aimed at institutions of higher education. And we're keeping an eye on funding for Native Hawaiian education, housing, healthcare, all kinds of different programs. So those challenges are there. They exist. I don't want anyone to be kind of lulled into some sort of false sense of security. But I hope to leave people with the knowledge that these challenges, they've existed for 25 years, if not earlier. Certainly, I think 2001 Supreme Court's decision in Rice v. Cayetano changed the narrative, and I think people often misquote and miscite Rice v. Cayetano. But these challenges have existed, and I think we will continue to weather them. And the delegation will continue to be, I don't think I'm overselling or overpromising to say the delegation will continue fighting and supporting Native Hawaiian programs as long as we need to. So I see that I have 1:45 left. I don't know if there's a follow-up question.
Actually, I think we're going to move on and then
do
a wrap up. Thank you, Cody. So Cody did highlight that there are obvious challenges. We're aware of them. People are talking in many different circles about them. And I want to turn to you, Chairman Watson. As an attorney with both private and government experience, what are your thoughts on the current legal challenges facing our Hawaiian community, and what can be done to fight against such challenges?
Well, I think we always have to be diligent and aware of these challenges. I mean, they're forever going to be there. But I think what we need to do is focus on what we can do. We need to practice sovereignty. We need to get things done. We need to work together collectively. And I'm not talking about just the different government entities. I'm talking about the Li'i Trust. You have the Kamehameha schools that have over 360,000 acres in the state. They also have 14 billion or more in assets. And you have OHA with 400, 500, 600 million in assets, along with a steady revenue stream from the city lands rents. You also have Queens that has, $1 billion in assets, close to $1 billion, as well as 6,000 acres. Excuse me, I'm talking about Lili'uokalani Children's Center. But, Lunalilo, we're working with them. We've identified maybe 10 different sites. We're going to start putting up kupuna housing. And they can practice their expertise. They have an excellent Keola Dean over there. He knows how to use tax credits. We just put on I was in the review committee. We put on a new trustee that's very familiar with that kind of affordable housing financing. So get things done. We're working with OHA. We're looking at some, very shortly, it will become in the news, some developments that have been prohibited. And so we're going to do it for them. We're going to step up and work with them and maybe do a mixed-use development that will provide housing as well as commercial space for them. We're looking at working with Kamehameha schools in the same area, similar, and joining the different elite trusts, working together. We've had meetings with Kamehameha schools and up in Waimea with Pakaranch. We're looking at activating, we have over 120-something thousand acres over there. A lot of it just sitting idle. So, but if we can consolidate with some of the Li'i trusts as well as the private sector and activate these lands for cattle, the cattle industry, agriculture, there's a whole bunch of different opportunities. We can even work with the Maoris. they're heavy, and I know some people are not that receptive to geothermal development, but the Maoris are using it. They're building houses, they're creating businesses from it, that grow from it and flow from it. It's something that is for the future. It is the future. And even the lands, the next couple hundred or the next 100 years, we're going to flip presently our inventory where we're going to have good lands. We're looking at not only the lands that are due us, but we're looking at all the idle state, public, including county lands that are sitting idle that could easily be converted into homesteading, whether it's, agriculture or residential, what have you. We're also looking at using our abilities to go up, create density, do more, high rises. What's wrong with living in a high rise overlooking Diamond Head in a great location where there's schools, there's a university, there's, other services, right? Transportation, what have you. We're looking at extending the TOD station in Kapolei to our Kapolei or our Kamakana Ali shopping center. That's going to be a little over a mile. It's going to cost probably about $500 million. But I think with the GET set aside and their problems that they're running going the other way, using our lands, which we own, the pathway to extend the mass transit would obviously be something that would be very ideal for our 4 different homesteads that surround this potentially new TOD station. We can also hook it up with the existing historic railroad track and other forms of opening up the leeward coast, not only to tourism, but for people to avail themselves of that transportation that could take them all the way into town. So it's a matter of activating, working, looking at opportunities that we can really impact our communities. So I'm excited about that. But let me also say it takes a strong leaders, and I think the Elite Trusts have some great leaders. I think we have some good legislators. It's a matter of really getting it together. But let's face it, folks, there are challenges, but there are good challenges in that if we step up and make the effort, like we've done with the Nanakuli Village Center, with that association, the whole Maka Marketplace in Kapolei, including the Waimea Village Center on the Big Island, the beneficiaries also become active. Government can be active, but we all have to collectively get active. Thank you.
I want to take an opportunity in the 4 minutes that we have left before we turn to questions from the audience to summarize some of the wisdom that's been shared on the panel today as it relates to paths forward, right? That was one of the things that we promised here that we'd be talking about, facing the challenges that are in front of the community today and what paths forward look like. And little bits and pieces have come out all throughout the morning about things that we can do and ideas that we can take as we leave moving forward. And I think Dr. Kame'elehiva started it out with a really good foundational premise that this is not the first period of challenge that the Native Hawaiian community has ever faced, right? She's bringing it back pre-overthrow through the present and some of the tremendous challenges that the Native Hawaiian community has faced in that regard as it relates to political existence, legal rights, so many moments along the way. Folks have pointed out that the Native Hawaiian community has persisted, survived, and thrived through those challenges. And that is the foundation of that. That is the foundation of pathways forward. And then we heard very specific recommendations about being strategic and coordinated, understanding where you can help, what's your kuleana in this overall project of a thriving Native Hawaiian community, and working with others and being very strategic in the various spaces where you can exercise your knowledge, your advocacy, and you can contribute. Being in the rooms where the decisions are made, that is critical wherever that decision's being made, whether it's about coconut rhinoceros beetle or it's about budgeting for giant Native Hawaiian programs at the federal level, whether it's about status on the international level, making sure that there are always people in those rooms who understand the language of what's being discussed and can speak the language of what's being discussed and can advocate for the community in those spaces. Also leaning on strategic relationships with other indigenous communities, other governments, ensuring that you're constantly working alongside, because you never know when the moment's going to come where you're going to be in the exact same battle, you know. And I think back to when I was with Cody in Washington not that long ago, a few years ago, and there was a huge Supreme Court case with regard to the Indian Child Welfare Act and challenges against keeping Native kids with Native families. And that case was terrifying to the extent that it really challenged the core of the entire body of law as it relates to the trust relationship between the United States and every single Native community in the United States. It was not focused on one Native community. It was focused on the foundational principles that uphold the trust relationship. And I had the honor of working on the amicus brief for the Congress in that case. But I will tell you, those challenges are persistent, like Chief of Staff Haya was sharing. You know, Rice versus Cayetano was 20 plus years ago, but that doesn't mean these challenges have been dormant. It's been a constant fight against these challenges. They ebb and flow, and they become more prominent in certain moments, or the environment's more fertile in certain moments for those challenges to take hold. But the challenges have been constant, and there's been a constant response. And I think what I saw when I was in DC is the strength of the community and what the community is doing on a day-to-day basis, to Chairman Watson's point, in language, in housing, in workforce development, in cultural fluency. Everything that's happening there is what everyone points to defend the community. We have this giant book of laws and cases and things that we as lawyers rely upon. But in reality, when people come in and challenge the Native Hawaiian community's right to something, we always point at the community and say, how can you deny that that is a thriving Native community? And nobody has an answer to that, because it's a thriving Native community. You know, and so continuing to do that work on the ground level is the best defense against these challenges. And I want to thank everyone here for sharing their wisdom today. It's been an amazing morning, and I feel very privileged to have been a part of it. And I'll pass it back to Councilmember Kia'aina for any closing remarks.
Thank you, Brianne. Actually, you know, at this juncture, I thought before we officially close, I had arranged this so that we would have a question and answer period. And so, do you want to, Brianne, did you want to help facilitate that period before we come to closure?
Sure. I did see one hand from the audience, and I know we have many folks watching the live stream, so we might have some written questions coming as well. But I think we're stealing a mic for you, and we'll be down in just a second.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That was a nice thing. You're good at it, right?
Aloha. I'm Elizabeth. They call me Ho'oipo Panakea. I am an attorney still, and I did do the I versus Drake case, which made sure we didn't have conflicts with our AG, so that the DHHL would have an attorney that would just be for the beneficiary. So I appreciate that Cully is actually doing the right thing and enforcing all this and being so creative and helpful and making things happen. And I'm thankful for all of you, and I really hope we can conquer this Trump administration, because they're pretty scary. But my question is for Esther. And I agree with you guys. We have to collaborate, find common ground, and work together. But you mentioned the 1983 report, and I know there were also findings about the socioeconomic conditions of us Native Hawaiians. And I just wondered if you could tell us more about that, please.
Thank you so much for the question. You know, before I answer the question, let me just say very quickly, for anyone who is trying to become knowledgeable about the federal Native Hawaiian relationship, you can divide it into 3 tiers. The first, of course, is the relationship under the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. Second, it's all of the efforts arising out of the overthrow. And then third, it's Native Hawaiian programs. And I had mentioned previously about all of the other programs that have been around for Native Hawaiian specific programs or when we were inserted. So the reason I'm saying this is I need to let everybody know, and for those who are out there or those who were born after 1983, if you would like to, I know you can Google it, right? But the 1983 Native Hawaiian Study Commission was federally created, and there's a volume 1 and a volume 2. Again, the majority findings, I was not happy, and I did not look at the summary because I was so mad a long time ago that I never looked at the findings. I did know that they acknowledged dismal social economic conditions of Native Hawaiians. I knew that, but I never looked at it until last night to remind myself of what they said beyond having no liability for the overthrow. And I think it's interesting. So, because Native Hawaiian programs, yes, every now and then they may threaten our funding, but that is stable with regard to support for Hawaiian programs, right? It is the underlying threat to the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act and the other trust relationship arising out of the overthrow, which is at stake. So let me just read something. And again, Native Hawaiians, plural, Study Commission, report on the culture, needs, and concerns of Native Hawaiians. I'm looking at page 45, and given some of the challenges on Native Hawaiian education, I'm going to say what its recommendations were. It says, additional educational and training opportunities to better equip Native Hawaiians for employment. This is the recommendations. It says, steps can be taken by private individuals and organizations and by governments at all levels to address these areas of concern. And specifically, it says, when they go down their list of specificity, their first consideration should be given to efforts that are undertaken by private Native Hawaiian groups. Of course, they're saying that because then they'll be at the end, right? Everybody give away their money, and then you go to the state, local, and then federal governments. But it specifically mentions the Kamehameha schools, which at the time was called Bishop Estate. It says examples of effective private groups that could expand or redirect their activities include Alolike, the Hawaiian Civic Clubs, and Bishop Estate. And then when it goes down into possible specific actions, it says in the area of education, appropriate private, local, and state organizations should consider instituting a program to encourage educational development that emphasizes the importance of education for Native Hawaiian youth and recruits eligible Native Hawaiian students to pursue higher education. So why am I sharing this? I'm just sharing this to say that even against that backdrop of how it was hurtful to us with regard to our overall relationship, I do know that the findings on the social economic conditions led to the establishment of the Native Hawaiian Education Act, as well as the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Act. And so thank you for the question. For anybody who wants to take a look at this, again, you can find it online. I would also say for resources, I also just pulled this out yesterday because, I don't get to dabble with Native Hawaiian issues all the time. But for anyone who's interested, this came out in June 2001. It is the Hawaii Advisory Committee on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, Reconciliation at a Crossroads, the implications of the apology resolution in Rice versus Cayetano for federal and state programs benefiting Native Hawaiians. It's just a wealth of information, and I actually used it for preparation for the panel discussion today. Anyway, thank you for the question.
We have a question from Noella Napoleon.
Hi, aloha. Sorry, it's not so much a question. I just wanted to, first of all, thank you all from the bottom of our hearts for doing this. Just two programs in the business world, federal programs that are under threat. I'm a business owner and a business advocate, mentor, instructor. So on the federal level, the 8A federal set-aside program, contracting set-aside program, which specifically notes Native Hawaiians, set aside opportunities for federal contracts, is under threat. The set-aside program was put on pause, and it's back, but they want to take our status away as special concerns as Native Hawaiians. And also the 8A program, mentorship, that's under threat. And finally, the Minority Business Outreach Center, which many Native Hawaiians participate in for free, that was eliminated overnight. So on the business side of things, our people are under threat for these programs that we couldn't otherwise gain access to. So just put that on our radar. Yeah. Aloha, mahalo nui.
Thank you for that. And I think that illustrates a point that a number of the panelists made, that there are challenges in many different areas, whether it's business, education, some of our environmental issues. And so it's always land. There's always a challenge as it relates to land and land holding. And so the more that those groups can collaborate together, can get in a room together and say, hey, we're facing these challenges. Are they similar to the challenges you're facing? Can we come up with a collective strategy, or at least be in touch with each other so you're not saying something to Cody that we don't, that is going to undermine our position. And I think it is a very delicate very delicate advocacy strategy that requires much more collaboration than I think we're accustomed to across different organizations, because there are very nuanced positions that certain entities can take that might leave everyone else in the cold, right? When we look at questions of blood quantum or trust status or other things, we all need to be very careful that we're bringing everyone along and we're not salvaging one group of entities at the expense of all the other ones. And so I'd like to pass it to Cody. I see her nodding. I'm sure she has thoughts on it also, but my thought there is collaboration is key.
Yeah, thank you, Brianne. This is, in fact, we are the Native 8A program has had its bumps and challenges, and they've run the gamut. So this is one of those places where we partner very strongly with the Alaska senators. And if I know so there are two maybe organizations to contemplate working with and being in touch with. One is the Native Hawaiian Organization Association, or NHOA. And the second is the Native American Contracting Association, or NACA. NACA's at a national level, and NHOA is specifically sort of focused on Native Hawaiian-owned small businesses in the 8A program. But we are in touch with Native businesses pretty regularly. We share the concerns about the attacks on these programs, and we tend to work on these annually through the National Defense Authorization Act. So I know I don't have any answers for you right now, but if that's at all helpful, those are some organizations to contemplate talking with and working with as we move forward on these programs.
And Councilmember Kia'aina would also like to jump in.
Noella, thank you for that question. I'd like to address that because there is an attack, first of all, on the 8A program for all minority business, which, of course, threatens the status for Native Hawaiian organizations and their program. And I would say this, that I see them at receptions, but I don't see the Native Hawaiian organizations, quite honestly, active with a lot of our organizations. And I hope that they try not to just run away from the unique political history of Native Hawaiians. And the reason, of course, is that as court cases go through the system, there's going to be a differentiation between a racial classification for other minority 8A programs, and then, of course, the political or trust relationship for NHOs. And I would just say that I would like to see a little bit more activism, because there is so much at stake. And I would say and venture to say that because of all of the money that they make, and it could be in the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars because they're non-competitive contracts, that the likelihood of a lawsuit to be filed would be on the deprivation of another business because of that program. So many of us have been working in the field with regard to protecting that political relationship with the federal government, and I would welcome them to join us to safeguard that relationship at all costs and to help in understanding the unique history. And that's going to make a difference, whether it be publicly, politically, or in the courts. And I would also say that that could also apply to the Kamehameha schools because it is a private trust, but at the same time, because of all of the positive political history that has been undertaken at the federal level, they need not run away from that history as well. Thank you.
Okay, we have an online question. One of the viewers would like to know if there is a way they can get access to all the links and resources reports mentioned in today's discussion.
You know, I got to figure out, it would be very easy for my staff to help to pull the information together. I think if I'm trying to figure out a resource, perhaps I don't know if I could work with OEV TV to maybe be able to put all of the resources together, and if you and the links, and if you have any questions, you can also contact my office. Thank you.
This is Cody. Pardon me for interrupting. Just to say as well, although they are likely to have to take their website down or it will be less responsive in the event of a shutdown, you may also find a lot of that documentation on the Department of the Interior's Office of Native Hawaiian Relations website as well. So it's a little bit less categorized. It's a little more difficult to follow, but a lot of that documentation is also there, just in case that's helpful. But I look forward to visiting Councilmember Kia Aina's website to get this information separately.
Mahalo. Aloha kako, Kimiona from Waimanalo. My question is to all the participants particularly, but more focused on the ideas of leadership coming from our elected officials. And it states, we have, as community members, there's a lot of exhaustion in trying to keep up and follow, and 10,000 things happening, as you guys all are aware. Not an excuse, but a reality. When has and how does our elected officials utilize something like the apology law in their work in a consistent manner? Do we feel, Councilmember Cody, do we feel like our representation for Hawaii is on the same page when it comes to Native Hawaiian things in this particular manner? Because administrations change frequently, and we start all over again, it feels like. And so I'm just curious how you feel personally of the work being done, and if we are all in fact on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimiona, for the question. I struggle with this a lot because every time there's a new legislative session, you know, I meet with some of these representatives, and you know, we do the greetings and all that, and what can I do to help you? Same thing I asked for last year. We need reconciliation for our people, you know. And then they're like, oh well, you know, well, we can try and propose this, that, this. I was like, well, it's not an ask. It's a law. There's a mandate. You know, and so I got to go through the education of the apology law. And a lot of, you know, you'd be surprised, a lot of these politicians do not know the apology law and do not know the ramifications of it and how serious it is. And so, you know, I think it's having to hold these political leaders accountable to this, you know, and making it a point every year, you know, and all we can do as community members is educate and advocate. And it's, you know, it's taken a while, but this is, you know, your question that you asked, Kimiona, is a question that I also want to know too. Do we do these folks understand, you know, the importance of the apology law? And if not, why? And if not, then what are we going to do about it? Like, what are we as a community going to do? Because, you know, when it comes to laws and stuff like that, I mean, these guys barely can pass laws nowadays. It was a monumental task to pass a law that acknowledges that our sovereignty was never taken away from us, and that these lands were stolen from us without compensation to us. That shouldn't be just put up on a shelf and not ever used again. We need to apply it and utilize it every year. That, you know, so I invite our Hawaiian caucuses to get re-educated and to reprioritize stuff like the apology law. Our trusts need to get involved and start doing more of this kind of advocacy, because if we just went sit back and you know, and let reconciliation happen for us on the beach, we'd still be down at the beach. But because we utilize something like the law, we have Aina today. This is just one example that we can utilize in the future to continue to do this, but there is not an education, and I talked with Representative Hussey about doing some sort of educational briefing for the legislature this year, and we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I think there needs to be a much broader education on this.
You know, thank you so much for your minute on that. To be honest with you, Kimiona, it has to start within our Hawaiian community. I don't think they know how to utilize it. And, you know, in my mind, again, you know, I was only in my late 20s when the development first started, and then I was 30 years old in 1993. And I remember praying, and I said, just make sure, God, that I don't do anything that's going to jeopardize our future claims, which is why we have the disclaimer at the end. And and I'm just sharing this with you because a lot of sweat equity went into that, and it's still valid, but it's underutilized. The other thing that I did was that because I didn't get much kokua, it was actually the faith-based organizations, it was churches from across the country, led by the United Church of Christ, who helped us navigate and go and try to get support from various members. But when it came to the committee report, because I didn't have a lot of mentors, I was worried because I was not an expert. I did have experts help with regard to looking at the facts, the whereas clauses of the resolution. And if anyone wants to also know where the 100th anniversary part came in, it was part of the resolution was based on the resolution for the 100th anniversary of the massacre at Wounded Knee, and Pete Taylor was one of the only individuals who helped me. And so what happened when it came to the committee report, I didn't know what I was doing, and I said, you know what? History and the records speak for itself. So what I did was I just wrote a couple of sentences, but I attached all of our treaties between the Kingdom of Hawaii and the United States in that document. And I realized that if you go to congress.gov and pull up Public Law 103-150, the link wasn't working, and so Representative Takuta's office helped to activate it. So anyway, I think that it's have to start with our community first. With regard to our officials, they don't know what to do with it, and but they don't know what to do with it because they're trying to take our lead. Now, the nation of Hawaii is already on their own course of action, so bravo for them. But I think that we shouldn't be waiting around, and we should all be exercising our own form of self-determination. With regard to, you know, how the federal government looks at us, they look at us as individuals, right? Native Hawaiians. They look at us as organizations, some with a governmental nexus, like DHHL and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and non-governmental, right? But I am still supportive and believe that a governmental entity, a Native Hawaiian governmental entity, within the framework of federal law, could help in bolstering that. I don't believe that such an establishment of an entity will compete with the nation of Hawaii or anybody else who would like to pursue independence at the international level. And so, again, I think it needs to start from within, but I also believe that a governmental entity would help with regard to the continuing challenges that we face. We have a political relationship and a trust relationship, but we do not yet have that government-to-government relationship.
We have a question right here. Her name is Kapua. She's just joining us.
Aloha, Kapua from Hawaiian. I am so sorry for being late. And you folks may have already addressed this. Thank you about for talking about the apology bill, Simeon, for bringing that up. Because many of us look at that, and even though it has that caveat of, you're not seeking reparations, but to me, that was at the time of that passing. Years has passed, decades have passed. And so while that instrument, which recognized all of the wrongs that have been done to us, and it's great that you got America to acknowledge and recognize that. To me, that's very key, very fundamental, but that in itself is short-stopped. We need to pick up that ball, and we have done that several times already. And this is because of challenges that have always come upon us as a people. Because, like you say, we are demonstrating, we are living that independently, but yet because we don't have our aupuni, because we don't have a government that we can all agree to come under, excuse me, brother, one that we can all agree to come under, or for the most part, a good majority of the Kanaka Oiwi, Kanaka Maoli, whatever we choose to call ourselves. And so, what type of examples, Kalakona, what type of examples would you recommend for us to demonstrate our independence collectively, besides being in a ku'e position of protecting what is already ours? So I'm glad that we've gone from protesters to kia'i, because it's a paradigm. When you change that language, it changes the whole perspective of what and who we are and what we're trying to do. So do any of you have any recommendations of how we collectively can rise up in a positive manner and not always be in the ku'e or in the malama? Because to me it's just our nature to malama our kuleana. Yeah, so we can all awamo that kuleana, but how do we awamo as a people? Because right now, so we have the CFR, I think it's 4350, that recognizes those that want to step forward in that manner. But then again, we still have those of us that, I don't know that I want to be registered like that. And yet I do want access to the information. I do want access to any benefits that's there, because I am one of the reasons that was created. So even though I may not agree with all of the instruments that America has put together, so-called on our behalf, it is a recognition. And so I will take it at that, but I'm more about how do we collectively holomua. Mahalo.
Mahalo for the question, and I think I assume everyone is going to want to chime in on this one, because I think it's a multi-pronged response. And we talk about it all the time, and within this group as well. There have been some folks who have tried to frame it as state versus federal versus international in a way that those can't all proceed together or shouldn't proceed together. But the reality is, there are rights to be protected at all of those levels, even at the city council level, for the Native Hawaiian community, and folks need to be working in all of those spaces simultaneously. And I will say for myself, before passing it over to Councilmember Kia'aina, working with federally recognized Native communities on the continent as well, that recognition is something they hold very dear, not because it defines their communities in any way, but because it is a formal government-to-government relationship with the United States that they assert through a governing entity and assert rights over land, resources, financial resources, cultural resources, and it's something that from a legal perspective is a very important tool to have in your tool belt. And so that conversation is always ongoing, right? Because there is a trust relationship that the federal government has acknowledged through over 200 federal laws acknowledging the special legal and political status of the Native Hawaiian community. But to your point, who is exercising that? Who goes into a room and has a conversation and speaks with Cody's boss and says, this is what we want as a people, will you do this for us? And I will say also, while I was working with the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, there were moments where there was a gap, where there was a very important issue. I'll use the example of the Farm Bill that really impacts farmers in a very significant way. And the question was, who's speaking on behalf of Native Hawaiian farmers? Because there are Native issues tied to all of this agricultural decision-making that's happening, right? And those questions loom large. Who is speaking on behalf? Who's going to come in and make sure Native Hawaiian farmers are protected from whatever's happening in the context of this bill development? And so I think those are questions that definitely require conversation and much more dialogue. But I think what I'd like to offer to that is everyone needs to act in their space, because they're at the city council level, at the state level, federal level, and international level. There's work to be done and rights to be protected throughout all of those. And so while things are moving and things are forming, I think we've heard two people say, we can't wait. We can't be waiting. We need to go out there and assert. So I'll pass it over to Councilmember Ki'aina for her additional thoughts.
Cody, don't worry, you're not getting off the hook there. You asked a very difficult question, and the reason being is that I like to call it, I don't like when I give something important to our community, like CR 50 or whatever it is. I never even utter that, because I just say the self-governance rule, because that's what it does. It is an administrative process for self-governance within the confines of federal law. When that was promulgated, the Native Hawaiian community made clear that it did not want the federal government involved. And so the federal government is actually still waiting for the Hawaiian community to get involved. I'm a believer that in order to get the community together, you need some money, and that that commitment by the federal government doesn't mean that they cannot give money. As you know, there were lawsuits filed when the Office of Hawaiian Affairs got involved, because there was a state nexus. Since the federal government has plenary authority over indigenous peoples, it is appropriate and legal for the federal government to provide money and get involved. So having said that, the question is, who in the Hawaii community is going to step forward? I have a lot of opinions on that, but I'm supposed to be diplomatic here, so I don't know if I want to opine on that, but I'm waiting. I think we need to talk about the future of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and if its mission is serving the needs of our Hawaiian community, not just on the programmatic side, but with the issue of self-determination. If OHA was not attached to the state of Hawaii, we would not be having a lot of the legal attacks relating to OHA, including voting restrictions right now, right? Rice versus Cayetano struck down the voting restriction to Native Hawaiians because of that state nexus. So I don't know the answer, Kapua, but I do know that it's been nearly 10 years since 2016 when the self-governance administrative process was established. And I guess I'm just trying to say that against the backdrop of all of us trying to do our kuleana and safeguard all of the programs and rights that are out there, there needs to be a hui of leaders who need to step forward within our community, not in our capacities as political leaders, within our community, that will seek to try to represent the collective. I don't know if I answered your question, but it's a very difficult one. I don't know if Brandon wanted to opine.
Oh yeah, I did. I have an answer for you, Tikapua. It's going to take a critical mass of people to do this. Our nation was founded by the gathering of 300 kupuna from across the Pai'aina. They did a proclamation on January 16, 1994, after the signing of the Apology Law, after Francis Boyle came to Hawaii, paid for by the state of Hawaii, and gave his opinion on the law. And he said that now that the Hawaiian people, now that the United States have now apologized for the overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom, the Hawaiian people can now proclaim and restore the independence they once had before the overthrow. And so Uncle Bumpy asked him point blank, Francis, what do we do? Francis told him, Bumpy, you have to go and make a public proclamation. And so he did. Next month, he went to the steps of Iolani Palace, and they made a public proclamation restoring the independence of Hawaii for Hawaiians. Not just for us that was gathered there, but for all of us. Just like how they all made us one state, they all put us part of the territory. It belongs to us. In apology law, it says that we have never relinquished our sovereignty. And so with that, they began gathering kupuna. And so for a year, they met. They started a constitutional convention. And this was not funded by the government. This was funded by us, our people. They did that. Francis Boyle sent one of his students. He lived with us for 1 year, and they constructed a constitution, which is the foundation of the nation of Hawaii. And they promulgated that constitution on the steps of Iolani Palace, January 16, 1995. This is not something that is impossible. It has been done before. It can be done again. Esther is correct. We need our people to understand the apology law. And we are willing to go out and put on educational panels and educational talks about the apology law because it's that important to us. We don't need to be funded to do this. This is our obligation to do this because it makes our work much easier. We've developed an apology law curriculum already, and we're beginning to teach it in schools because we need the next generation to have this bold vision of the future and not be trapped in whatever the U.S. government has in mind for us. We can think outside of the box, but at Tikapua, it's going to take a critical mass. But we have our sovereignty within us, and it's just going to take us moving forward together to do that.
We thank you. We're a little bit over time, but we don't want to take the opportunity away from Cody to also weigh in on this question.
Thank you. I have to agree and or again sort of like right on the or dovetail rather with what Esther and Brandon were both saying. I think maybe an answer that's a little bit different is really something that Brianne mentioned earlier. When contemplating its relationship with an indigenous community, if you're looking at this through the federal lens, but also I think through every sort of governmental lens, they have questions about, are you a community? How are you a community? How are you demonstrating that? And that for the Native Hawaiian community for decades, was the Hawaiian Renaissance, the Polynesian Voyaging Society, leading at the Constitutional Convention in 1979, coming together again through the 80s, coming again together again in the 100th year anniversary of the overthrow. And we continue to do that. And I think that actually really is perhaps the most important part. Questions of who's going to represent the Native Hawaiian community, how that voice, who has that voice, how that occurs. I agree with Brandon. That's going to have to be a critical mass, and the Hawaiian community has to lead that discussion. But I think the most important thing as we figure all of that out is to continue demonstrating our cohesiveness as a community. That is in large part what differentiates the Native Hawaiian community and other indigenous communities from the various groups that are now part of the United States, whether they came from, wherever they came from, Ireland, Italy, name a country. That's kind of where the difference is, besides the fact that we were here, right? Captain Cook didn't just show up. There was like 1 million people here when he got here, but that's the other part of it. So I think a answer perhaps different than you were expecting. I just want to encourage, final point here, and literally anyone can talk to a delegation office. This is going to be difficult during the shutdown because we're limited in what we can do during a shutdown. But as a general proposition, literally anyone. I think a lot of times people think, oh, I can't do that. I'm not qualified. We are here to talk and hear from constituents. So it's my office, it's Senator Schatz' office, it's Congressman Tokuda's, Congressman Case, down to state legislators and city council members. Our job is to hear from you. And I think people often feel like I don't have the expertise to get involved. We can help with a lot of what you want to accomplish. But we don't want to read your mind. We don't want to guess what you want. We need to hear from you folks directly. Brianne pointed out a good point. If we don't know how to best help Native Hawaiian farmers, we're doing our best to collect that information. But if we don't hear from anybody, we're just guessing. So I think my last point here is that's part and parcel of our job. And I don't ever want anyone to think, I can't contact them. We're here. I'm here in DC. I have colleagues in Honolulu on the same time zone as you folks. So I think that's my final pitch there is that's our job.
Aloha, everybody. We're going to have to come to closure on this panel discussion. I just wanted to thank both our moderator, Brianne Nu'uhiva, as well as our panelists, Brandon Maka'avaava and Cody Haya, as well as our other two panelists for being here today. But thank you to all of you, and thank you again to OEV TV to helping us live stream this. We put this together real quickly because we knew that Hawaiian History Month was ending, and I know that we could do this anytime, but I already knew what the question was going to be. If we did it next week, they're going to say, how come? How come? When I say Hawaiian History Month, no questions asked, right? But listen, we're not clearly limited to Hawaiian History Month, and please feel free to contact us. My staff know. Cody, thank you for telling them to contact all of us, but my staff I saw them breathing heavily because, even if I'm at the Honolulu City Council for some reason, I do whatever I like, to hold panel discussions on political history of Native Hawaiians. Anyway, thank you so much for all of you for being here today, and I hope that you learn a little bit more about the political history of Native Hawaiians. And all we have to do is to keep on doing the good work in our communities and moving forward. Mahalo nui loa.
Mahalo, everyone. Ahui ho.